So for this week on Cyber School, we're going to talk about how to successfully integrate our products with RingCentral. RingCentral is a really big platform that we work with on a very regular basis. When I was working in our tech support department, we probably spoke with different techs at RingCentral or end customers for RingCentral. My gosh, maybe 4 or 5 times a day. They do a lot of business for us, and they're just a really big platform. They're definitely kind of a market dominator out there in terms of the things that they've implemented on the platform and just the platform in general, because it's really rock solid in comparison to some of the other ones out there. Not to say that the other platforms aren't as good as RingCentral, but I think RingCentral just came about at the right time with the right feature set and has just stayed rock solid, really haven't adjusted their prices and just have a great offering. So we'll talk about how to integrate our products on the platform and the different extension types that you can use when you're setting up equipment on the particular platform. So with RingCentral, there are requirements, but there aren't requirements for RingCentral. When you're setting up some equipment on RingCentral, you can use any SIP transport protocol, and that's just how the actual SIP messages get from your CyberData device to RingCentral, and they support the whole gambit. They would prefer if you use TLS and SRTP, but you can use anything, which is really beneficial for some of our long-standing customers that have some of our older products, just a testament to how good CyberData products are, but they really last out there for a long time. So you can use any of the different SIP transport protocols, UDP, TCP, or TLS, as well as either secured or unsecured audio being RTP or SRTP. RingCentral would recommend, as would CyberData, that if your device supports TLS and SRTP, go ahead and use that, because more security is always better than less security. But if you're using one of our older legacy devices that doesn't support that, or you're using a model that just doesn't support it, no problem. You can still use that equipment on RingCentral, which is nice comparatively to other platforms where they're just, it's a non-mover. You just can't use that equipment. When you're using products on RingCentral, you can only manually configure them. They don't offer, say, like direct auto provisioning through RingCentral yet, that you'll get with other platforms. Not to say that that's a bad thing, but that's just kind of how it goes. Honestly, it's still kind of industry standard. The provisioning through a particular platform is really kind of a nice to have thing and is very exclusive to certain platforms. Not everybody does it. When they do it, it's very nice. But with RingCentral, it's just going to be regular manual configuration where you get the credentials and you're just going to enter them. And there's 2 different extension types that you'll use on RingCentral. Now, for these 2 different extension types, they're what's known as a paging extension or a digital line, and they'll function a little bit differently depending on the actual use case for it. Of course, a paging extension, as in the name, is designed for one-way paging, and this is one of the things that I think really set RingCentral apart in terms of their market share and just how good of the platform is they were really kind of one of the market leaders in cloud-hosted providers that are offering a way to do one-way paging without having to pay for a regular seat license, which is, what still a lot of the industry does today. And I think is one of the big reasons that a lot of people like RingCentral is because you can use equipment like ours and some of our competitors for absolutely free on the platform, which is just a great benefit. But that paging extension, it's great for announcements because it's a one-way extension, meaning that you can get audio from the caller to the callee, meaning, if you pick up your phone and you call a paging device extension, audio can go from your phone to, say, one of our speakers, but any audio can't come back from the speaker. So might not be very good for something like one of our talkback speakers just because you can't get audio back from it, and is just a no-go for something like one of our intercoms, as an example. And, since it is a free extension on RingCentral, there's a trade-off. It's got that limited feature set where there's no audio that can be passed from the called device to the caller, meaning, in that same example of calling a speaker, if it was a talkback speaker, no audio can come back from the speaker to the phone, but you also can't send DTMF during the call, which can make it a little bit more difficult when you're using a product, say, like our SIP paging adapter, and you're trying to connect it to, say, a Bogan PCM 2000 zone controller to be able to toggle those different analog zones. That's something we'll talk about in a little bit more depth, but the paging extension is a little bit more limited, but it's free. So, you're kind of getting what you're paying for, and you're not. So, you really can't complain. one limitation with a paging device, and of course, in addition to the limited feature set, is there's a hard limit of only 25 paging devices per account, and that's just, I think, an arbitrary number that RingCentral picked. I don't know that there's any rhyme or reason as to why they picked 25, but it is a hard limit, and to my knowledge, you can't even pay them for more paging devices. It's just you get 25 per account, and that's it. So then as it differs for the other extension type is what's commonly referred to as a digital line, a bring your own device, a BYOD. The terminology differs, but I've found most of the time that different RingCentral sales executives that I've spoken with have always referred to it as a digital line or a BYOD device, a bring your own device extension line. And that's going to be a regular phone extension, something like you would use for your regular desk phone or your mobile phone. It's basically a full regular seat. And you get, of course, all the standard features with that, two-way calling, DTMF, voicemail, all the things that you would expect if you're paying for a seat, which makes it great for two-way conversations for products like our TalkBack speaker or intercoms or anything where you're actually going to want to send audio from the CyberData device to whatever it's calling or vice versa. So, of course, things like our TalkBack intercoms, or just our regular intercoms, of course, they're TalkBack because they're intercoms, but our TalkBack speakers, our call buttons, anything where audio would need to go from our device to the phone, you're going to want a digital line. But with that, since you're getting all those features and, bidirectional audio, it is going to incur a regular monthly fee just like any other phone. We can't kind of skirt around to get free or a limited price or anything like that. It's going to be your regular monthly fee. So those are the two different extension types that you can use on the RingCentral platform. But with that, with these differentiations between the two, which extension is going to be right? Well, honestly, it kind of depends on what product you're using and the use case for that particular product. When you're dealing with one-way paging, say for a product like our IP66 outdoor horn, that's a one-way device. There's no way really for it to send audio back to the caller. So that one's perfect for a paging extension, as are things like our standard SIP speaker, where predominantly you're going to be calling that and making an announcement. Those are really good for one-way paging. Also, a product like our SIP paging adapter kind of rides the line between the two, where that one honestly, a lot is used as a paging extension, but in certain scenarios, you're going to need a digital line for it. But as another kind of a difference here is when you're dealing with like two-way audio, something like an intercom, a call button, a talkback speaker, you might want a digital line. So you've got that full talkback capability, that two-way or full duplex conversation capability. So that way you can get the most out of that particular product that you used. And in some cases, you will want to set up something like our SIP paging adapter or a SIP paging server as a digital line instead of a regular paging extension. And all of that differentiation and the decision point between that comes down to zoned paging. And when I say zoned paging, I'm meaning things like actual DTMF selection for an analog amplifier. One of the cool things with RingCentral is when you're setting up all of these different paging extensions, you can set them up in a paging group. So these different paging devices that you set up, say a speaker in your 10 different classrooms, you can use them all for free and you can add them all into different groups all through the RingCentral system, all completely free, which is really, really powerful, of course, if you're using IP-based speakers. But if you're using something like that PCM 2000 from Bogan that I mentioned, that a lot of different schools will use, that requires actual DTMF pass-through for analog zone selection, because these zones are controlled by that analog amplifier, not by RingCentral, you're going to need that digital line, that full seat extension, so that way you can actually pass DTMF to that paging adapter to select the zone. And really, the crux of it is just how all of these different zones are selected. If you're dealing with digital zones with something like the RingCentral paging groups, you're fine with just the paging extensions. But if you're dealing with analog zones and you want to utilize more of those zones, you're going to need something like a digital line, so that way you can actually send DTMF to the particular device. But in some cases, you'll also want to use a digital line for something like our SIP paging server, which instead of using, say, the paging groups through RingCentral that are all toggleable and selectable, and it's just a different extension to call, you call a single extension, the SIP paging server, and dial a 2-digit digit zone number to select a local multicast group. So really, an extension type really depends on the particular use case. And if you've got any questions, definitely reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. Our support department, like I said, deals with RingCentral all the time, and they'll know exactly how to set up your CyberData device and which extension type is going to be right for your particular use case. So now that we've kind of talked about all the extensions at length, let's talk about the actual setup process and setting up the extension in RingCentral. So when you go and you're setting up an extension on RingCentral, it's always going to be recommended by both RingCentral and CyberData to use TLS and SRTP when it's possible. If your CyberData device is going to support both of those protocols or even just one of them, I'd say go ahead and use it. Just because more security is always going to be better than less security. Just so that way your calls are encrypted. It's just better overall. You know, if you've got a lock on your door, you might as well use the lock. But with that, security is recommended, but it's not required. You know, if you're using one of our older devices, something like, say, one of our V2 speakers, or, you know, currently one of our SIP IP66 horns that might not support TLS and SRTP and some of the fancy new DNS-related changes that we're implementing, sometimes you can just set them up without that actual encryption. And that allows any CyberData device to work with RingCentral, which is different from a lot of hosted providers that are adding in requirements for this TLS and SRTP. So if you've got a CyberData device, it's probably going to work on RingCentral, which is a really nice thing to know. Then just confidence in the platform. And extension creation is going to be fairly standard as you're going through your digital line setup or your paging device setup. Of course, paging device is going to be a lot simpler than digital line setup. Digital line, you got to pick a phone number, you got to pick, you know, where it's actually located for all of the emergency 911 information, but it's fairly standard as you go through and fill everything out. And then you're just going to incur a regular monthly fee. You don't need to pay for any equipment from RingCentral because you probably already have the equipment. But when you're setting up a paging device, all you need is just the name of the extension. CyberData would recommend, like, say, for example, if you're setting up a speaker, name it the, you know, say Classroom 1 speaker or Classroom 2 speaker. So that way they're easily identifiable if you need to do any work on the platform in the future. And then just set an extension number as desired. But like I said, a digital line requires a little bit more information, you know, a specific full phone number that you want to use, emergency 911 information, all the kind of stuff that you would expect with a full, you know, a full seat, a regular digital line on RingCentral. As we go through for the SIP configuration, this part's super duper easy. RingCentral formatted all of the different things in the actual credential pop-up that you get to match or nearly mirror the exact terminology that we use on our products. So it's very, very easy to tell, okay, you've got your SIP server, that goes in your primary SIP server field, and you're just going to use all of those credentials and put them in place as provided from RingCentral, which makes the actual setup process super duper easy. And then, of course, you're just going to want to set your SIP transport and your RTP encryption to, of course, what your device supports. RingCentral's got, you know, kind of a little questionnaire that you go through when you're setting up one of the devices. Does your device support TLS 1.2 and SRTP? And you check a little yes or no radio button. And if it's yes, it gives you all the credentials for TLS setup and the instructions for TLS setup. Or if it doesn't, it just walks you through the usual UDP setup. So it makes it a lot easier to go through and set everything up. RingCentral is really a breeze for manual configuration. And of course, as we recommend, if the device supports TLS and SRTP, go ahead and use it because, again, just more security is better than no security. There are kind of one settings that you will want to adjust in addition to the regular SIP credentials that you'll get from RingCentral. One setting on our end we call the keep alive period, and that's going to be on the SIP tab of your CyberData device, and that would be on any CyberData device from an intercom to a speaker, what have you. That one needs to be disabled and set to 0. And without a long explanation of what that does, if it's not set to 0, your device is just not going to work properly. So just make sure that you set that value to 0. And then the other optional thing that you can do is you can force the audio codec to PCMU, known as G711 ULAW. Generally, it sounds a bit better on some products, not absolutely required, because we've definitely improved the audio quality of other audio codecs on there. But we find that PCMU sounds the best, and that's the North American telecom standard. So everybody's kind of used to hearing that audio quality because that's how all of our phones sound. So when you're setting up a paging device, again, just to talk about this a little bit more in depth, paging devices, you've got a hard limit of 25 paging devices per account, and all of these different paging devices, after you set them up, can be put into groups. Effectively, these are just going to be zones that are controlled through RingCentral. And each of these devices can be in many groups. So say, for example, in a school where you've got, say, speakers in every single room and you've got, say, an all page group, well, you can have a group of speakers, say, that would be only be first grade, only be second grade, so on and so forth. So you're not limited to say, okay, only one paging device can only be in one paging group. A paging device can be in as many groups as you like. And one of the nice features that RingCentral has is after you go and create that group, you can control what phones can actually make announcements to that particular group. So that way you can really limit, say, in that school environment, you might not want a phone, say, in the far corner of the library to make announcements for the entire school because some hooligans might go and grab the phone and, do just what hooligans will do, which makes it, really advantageous. And one of the big qualities that I think makes RingCentral an industry leader in free paging support. They're one of the first companies and hosted providers that have added something like this. They've had it for more than 5-6 years, and just make them really a market dominator in terms of the space and why they have been established and are continuing to be one of the biggest providers in hosted telecommunications. But finally, just to kind of summarize our whole integration here, extension setup and the creation is very, very easy to go through and set everything up in comparison to other platforms that require specific device information. It's really, really a breeze to set up. And the techs at RingCentral are usually pretty versed on setting up our products because they work with them on a fairly regular basis. They know a little bit about it, but never be afraid to reach out to our tech support department if you get any questions or you're a little bit unsure. We've got a whole bunch of documentation that walks through the process, but our support team is always happy to help with RingCentral integration. We deal with it on a daily basis. But some of the other nice things with RingCentral is they've just got a wide support for security. If you want security or you don't, they don't really care. They're just going to let you use your products as they function, which is nice because it gives you the capability to opt into security features if you want. We recommend you do. If you can use security, you should go ahead and use it. But overall, they're just a really strong platform, especially with their free paging support and how long they've had that. I think that's one of the things that have turned RingCentral into a real market dominator. And the final thing that I'll just talk about is the complete reliability of the platform. They've been out there for so long, and I know of one potential time where people have had an outage of their platform in the 5-6 years that I've been working with them, and that was over one weekend that they had a little bit of an outage just because of some snowstorms in some areas. But overall, they're an extremely reliable platform. They're great for paging support and security, and really a great option for a paging system.
Thank you for watching this edition of Cyber School. If you have any questions, please get in contact with our sales department. They are available by email at sales@cyberdata.net or by phone at 831-373-2601 extension 334. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from CyberData.